Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. She learned early that power didn't always announce itself. Sharon Jones grew up in a quiet coastal town in the northeastern United States, the daughter of a woman who stitched wedding gowns by day and read balance sheets by night. Her mother, Evelyn Jones, had once been a brilliant finance student forced to abandon her dreams after an unexpected pregnancy, and she raised Sharon with an unusual mix of tenderness and discipline. Sharon learned how to listen before she learned how to speak, how to observe before she acted. While other children played outside, Sharon spent hours with numbers, business magazines, and old notebooks filled with her mother's unrealized plans. By the time she was 16, she was already running small online ventures under fake names, saving every dollar, learning how the world really worked. She loved classical music, long walks near the harbor, and the quiet satisfaction of solving problems no one else could see. Her dream was not fame, it was control, stability, and the freedom to never be powerless. Desmond Vincent's childhood could not have been more different. Raised in a crowded suburb outside Chicago, he was the eldest son in a family that celebrated loud confidence and visible success. His father, Leonard Vincent, believed respect came from status, and his mother, Carol, believed a man's worth was measured by how others praised him. Desmond grew up chasing applause. He played sports he didn't love, studied subjects he didn't understand, and learned early how to mask insecurity with charm. He dreamed of becoming someone important, someone people listened to. He loved luxury cars, expensive watches, and the idea of admiration. Yet beneath the surface, he struggled with self-doubt, especially when things didn't come easily. Failure terrified him more than loneliness ever could. They met in a modest cafe near a commuter station on a rainy afternoon. Sharon was reviewing documents on her tablet, dressed simply, blending in by design. Desmond spilled coffee on her coat while rushing in late, panicking and apologizing in a flurry of words. She laughed, not annoyed, and their conversation unfolded naturally. He was drawn to her calm. She was intrigued by his ambition. They met again, then again, sharing stories, dreams, and frustrations. Sharon never spoke of her wealth or her growing corporate empire. Desmond spoke endlessly of what he wanted to become. Love formed slowly, built on companionship and mutual support. Sharon admired his drive. Desmond admired what he thought was her humility. As their relationship deepened, differences quietly surfaced. Desmond wanted visible progress, better apartments, better cars, louder celebrations of milestones. Sharon preferred privacy, modest living, and reinvestment. She paid for dates without comment, solved problems quietly, and never complained. When Desmond proposed, it was dramatic and public. Sharon said yes privately later that night, after careful thought. She believed love meant patience and compromise. Their marriage was comfortable at first, filled with routines and shared mornings. Sharon handled finances discreetly. Desmond assumed he was the provider, unaware that her income dwarfed his salary. Desmond worked at a rapidly growing corporation, unaware it was quietly controlled by a shadow executive board chaired by Sharon herself. She never interfered directly in his department, believing personal and professional lines should not cross. Desmond, however, felt overlooked at work. Promotions passed him by. Recognition never came. His resentment grew silently, fed by whispers from co-workers and his own insecurities. He began to feel smaller at home, especially as Sharon remained calm and unbothered by material setbacks. Then Anita Frederick arrived. She introduced herself as a consultant, polished and magnetic, with stories that shifted subtly each time she told them. Anita was a con artist by trade, sharp-eyed, emotionally perceptive, and skilled at identifying weak points. She noticed Desmond's hunger immediately. She praised him, listened intently, mirrored his frustrations, and slowly positioned herself as the only one who truly understood him. Desmond felt seen in a way he hadn't felt in years. What began as lunches turned into secrets, then emotional dependency. At home, Sharon sensed the distance. She noticed the shorter conversations, the guarded phone calls, the irritation in Desmond's voice. She tried to reconnect through shared activities, suggesting trips, quiet evenings, conversations about the future. Desmond dismissed them, accusing her of being complacent and unambitious. Sharon absorbed the words silently, still refusing to reveal the truth of who she was or what she controlled. She believed love could survive honesty later. She didn't know how wrong she was. When Sharon discovered she was pregnant, it felt like a fragile miracle. She planned carefully, adjusting schedules, ensuring health and safety, dreaming of a child raised with love and balance. Desmond reacted with forced excitement, but fear gnawed at him. A child meant responsibility, permanence, and exposure. Anita's influence intensified. She fed his doubts, planted seeds of suspicion about Sharon's secrets, and suggested that Desmond was settling for less than he deserved. As Sharon prepared quietly for motherhood, Desmond prepared for escape. Anita convinced him Sharon was holding him back, that he needed freedom to rise. He began siphoning money, moving assets he barely understood, trusting Anita to guide him. Sharon noticed discrepancies but chose not to confront him yet. She believed timing mattered. She believed love still had a chance. The baby shower planning began as a gentle affair, close friends, soft colors, intimate joy. Sharon wanted peace. Desmond saw it as a performance, a final act before a decision he had already made. The room filled with laughter and expectation, unaware of the fracture beneath the surface, unaware that everything was about to change. The days leading up to the baby shower unfolded with a strange duality in Sharon's life. On the surface, everything appeared serene. She attended prenatal appointments alone by choice, savoring the quiet moments where she could hear her baby's heartbeat without interference. She spent evenings assembling a nursery with careful precision, choosing neutral tones and handcrafted furniture sourced from small artisans. Motherhood, to her, was not just an emotional milestone. It was a responsibility she approached with the same seriousness she brought to business. She read obsessively, researched child development, and journaled letters to her unborn child, promising honesty, protection, and freedom. What she did not write about was the growing heaviness in her chest whenever Desmond entered the room. Desmond, meanwhile, lived in a constant state of agitation. At work, his performance deteriorated as his attention drifted. He arrived late, left early, and spent hours locked in private calls with Anita. Anita had become his refuge and his strategist. She spoke with certainty, painting vivid futures where Desmond was admired, wealthy, and unburdened by a wife who hid things and a life that felt too quiet for his ego. She subtly encouraged his resentment, reframing Sharon's calmness as indifference, her privacy as manipulation. Desmond began rewriting his own reality, convincing himself he was a victim of circumstance rather than an architect of his choices. Sharon noticed the changes in his habits with painful clarity. The scent of unfamiliar cologne. The way he angled his phone away from her. The impatience in his voice when she spoke about the baby. She did not confront him immediately, not out of fear, but calculation. Sharon had learned long ago that truth revealed at the wrong moment could do more harm than good. She quietly expanded her security measures, audited accounts, and monitored financial movements. When she confirmed Desmond had begun moving money without explanation, her heart broke, not because of the loss, but because of the intent behind it. New characters entered Sharon's orbit during this time, each playing a role in stabilizing her crumbling personal world. There was Lydia Moore, her longtime legal advisor and one of the few people who knew Sharon's true professional identity. Lydia was sharp, protective, and fiercely loyal, often urging Sharon to prepare for outcomes she didn't want to imagine. There was Marcus Hale, the head of corporate security, who noticed the stress lines forming on Sharon's face and offered silent support without prying. And there was Evelyn Jones, Sharon's mother, who sensed something was wrong during their weekly calls, though Sharon shielded her from the truth. Desmond's family, on the other hand, remained oblivious. His parents praised him loudly for becoming a father, boasting to friends about his future while unknowingly standing on the edge of disgrace. Desmond basked in their approval while privately resenting Sharon for not being impressed by the same shallow validation. His internal conflict intensified. Part of him felt guilt, another part felt justified, and the louder part, the one Anita fed, felt entitled. Anita escalated her manipulation with precision. She encouraged Desmond to secure his freedom before the baby arrived, warning that once the child was born, Sharon would control everything. She forged documents, created false narratives, and positioned herself as both lover and savior. Desmond, blinded by his need to feel powerful, trusted her without question. He did not verify, did not reflect, did not pause. Every step he took pushed him further away from redemption. As the baby shower date approached, Sharon made a decision of her own. She instructed Lydia to prepare documents, not to retaliate, but to protect. She finalized contingency plans for every possible outcome. She reviewed employment structures, governance clauses, and emergency protocols. Sharon did not cry. She did not rage. She prepared. To her, preparation was an act of love, for herself and her unborn child. The night before the baby shower, Desmond slept restlessly, haunted by half-formed fears. Sharon slept peacefully, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding a future she had already accepted might look very different from what she once imagined. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that two people under the same roof were walking toward a collision that would redefine them both. By the morning of the baby shower, everything was set in motion. The decorations were delivered. The guests confirmed. The gifts were wrapped. And in Desmond's briefcase, hidden beneath false confidence and borrowed courage, lay the papers that would shatter the illusion of celebration. The baby shower unfolded in a sunlit event hall overlooking a quiet river, decorated in soft creams and muted golds that Sharon had chosen herself. The room hummed with warmth, friends laughing, relatives exchanging stories, soft music floating above the clink of glasses. Sharon moved through it all with a serene smile, accepting hugs and gifts, her hand often resting protectively on her belly. She wore a flowing dress that made her look radiant and calm, the picture of expectation and grace. No one noticed the way her eyes briefly searched the entrance every few minutes, or how she inhaled deeply before greeting each guest, as though bracing for something unnamed. Desmond arrived late, his smile tight, his suit immaculate but his energy unsettled. He kissed Sharon's cheek stiffly, avoiding her eyes, and she felt the distance like a chill despite the warmth of the room. As the event progressed, speeches of goodwill were shared by friends and relatives, each one weaving hope and joy into the air. Sharon listened, grateful but strangely detached, as though she were observing her own life from a careful distance. Desmond sat rigidly beside her, barely touching his drink, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Anita was not present, but her influence loomed heavily in his thoughts. Every compliment directed at Sharon felt to him like an accusation. Every mention of family felt like a trap. When it was time to open gifts, Desmond stood abruptly, interrupting the flow of celebration. The room quieted, attention shifting toward him. Sharon looked up, surprised by the sudden movement, her heart pounding with a recognition she could not yet name. Desmond cleared his throat, his voice trembling despite his attempt at confidence. Instead of words of affection or gratitude, he reached into his briefcase and placed an envelope into Sharon's hands. The room fell into stunned silence. Sharon looked down slowly, deliberately, reading the first line before lifting her eyes to his face. Divorce papers. The words seemed to echo through the space, louder than any gasp or murmur. Desmond spoke, something about needing freedom, about things not working, but his words blurred into insignificance. Sharon did not cry. She did not shout. She folded the papers carefully, handed them back to him, and stood up. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and clear as she thanked the guests for coming and asked them to give her a moment. The dignity in her composure unsettled everyone present, especially Desmond, who suddenly realized he had underestimated her strength. The aftermath was quiet but devastating. Guests left in confusion and discomfort, whispers trailing behind them like shadows. Sharon retreated to a private room with Lydia, who had arrived discreetly midway through the event. Lydia did not ask questions. She read Sharon's expression and nodded once, already understanding. Sharon instructed her calmly, outlining steps with precision that betrayed how long she had prepared for this moment. Meanwhile, Desmond, shaken by the lack of drama he had expected, tried to justify his actions to anyone who would listen. His parents arrived late, confused and embarrassed, struggling to reconcile the scene they walked into with the narrative Desmond had sold them. The following morning, Sharon moved with purpose. She contacted corporate leadership under secure channels and scheduled an emergency board meeting. By midday, she arrived at the headquarters where Desmond worked, not as his wife, but as the woman who owned his professional fate. The reveal was swift and unceremonious. In a room filled with executives, Sharon disclosed her identity as the company's hidden CEO, her authority backed by documentation and years of quiet governance. Desmond watched from the side, disbelief turning into horror as realization dawned. Sharon's voice did not waver as she cited breaches of conduct, financial impropriety, and ethical violations. His termination was effective immediately. There was no satisfaction in her expression, only closure. Desmond's world collapsed rapidly after that. Anita vanished the moment she realized there was nothing left to take. The money he had moved disappeared with her, along with every promise she had whispered into his ear. His calls went unanswered. His messages bounced back into silence. Friends distanced themselves. His parents confronted him with disappointment he could not deflect. Alone in a small apartment stripped of luxury and illusion, Desmond finally faced the truth of his choices. There was no one left to blame. Sharon, on the other hand, stepped into a new phase of life with quiet determination. She finalized the divorce swiftly and legally, protecting her child's future with meticulous care. She returned to her work openly now, no longer hiding, balancing leadership with motherhood in waiting. In private moments, she allowed herself to grieve, not the man Desmond had become, but the dream she had once believed in. Yet even in grief, there was relief. The weight of secrecy had lifted. By the end of this phase, Sharon stood at the threshold of new beginnings. Not defined by betrayal, but shaped by resilience. Not broken, but sharpened. The storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. And ahead of her lay a future she would build honestly, fiercely, and on her own terms. The weeks following the public collapse of Desmond's life unfolded quietly, but the silence was heavy with consequence. Sharon relocated from the marital home into a serene townhouse closer to the medical center overseeing her pregnancy. The move was intentional, practical, safe, and symbolic. She wanted no physical reminders of a life that no longer existed. Her days became structured around wellness, legal finalities, and leadership responsibilities she now carried openly. Employees watched her closely, expecting bitterness or vengeance, but Sharon offered neither. She led with clarity and discipline, implementing reforms that strengthened the company and quietly corrected the damage Desmond had helped create. In the evenings, she attended prenatal classes, walked by the river, and wrote letters to her unborn child, speaking of courage, self-worth, and the importance of choosing integrity even when it costs love. Desmond drifted through his own aftermath in contrast. He bounced between cheap rentals, drained accounts, and unanswered messages. His former colleagues avoided him. Recruiters who once entertained his ambition no longer returned calls. The illusion he had built his identity on was gone, replaced by a stark understanding of how fragile his confidence truly was. He attempted to locate Anita, filing reports and chasing false leads, but she had disappeared completely, leaving no trail. With every failed attempt, the reality hardened. He had been used. Alone with his thoughts, Desmond replayed moments he had dismissed, Sharon's patience, her restraint, her quiet warnings he never bothered to hear. Regret arrived not as a dramatic breakdown, but as a dull, constant ache that refused to leave. As Sharon entered her final trimester, new relationships formed naturally around her. Dr. Elaine Porter, her obstetrician, became an unexpected source of encouragement, reminding Sharon that strength did not require isolation. Naomi Reed, a fellow executive and single mother, joined her for lunches and candid conversations about balancing power and vulnerability. Sharon found herself laughing again, not loudly, but genuinely. She reclaimed small joys, cooking meals slowly, listening to music without distraction, envisioning a home shaped by warmth rather than performance. Her identity was no longer fragmented. She was not hiding, not performing, not waiting for validation. Desmond attempted one last reach. He wrote Sharon a letter, handwritten, careful, stripped of excuses. He admitted his failures, his blindness, his fear of insignificance. He did not ask for reconciliation, he asked for forgiveness. Sharon read the letter in silence, feeling the weight of what could have been. She did not respond immediately. When she did, weeks later, her reply was brief and compassionate. She acknowledged his apology, wished him clarity, and set firm boundaries. Forgiveness, she wrote, was not an invitation back, it was a release. For both of them. The birth arrived earlier than expected on a quiet morning washed in rain. Sharon labored with steady focus, supported by her mother and a small medical team she trusted completely. When she held her daughter for the first time, the world narrowed to a single, overwhelming truth: this was her future. She named her Eliza, a name that meant promise and resilience. In that moment, every loss recalibrated itself into purpose. Sharon felt no bitterness, only resolve. She had survived betrayal, exposure, and heartbreak, and emerged with clarity intact. News of the birth reached Desmond through a mutual acquaintance. He sat with the information for a long time, imagining a child he would never hold. The grief was sharp but deserved. He began rebuilding in small, unglamorous ways: temporary work, therapy, learning humility for the first time in his life. Redemption did not come quickly, and it did not come easily. But growth, for the first time, was real. Sharon returned to work months later with Eliza woven seamlessly into her life. She reshaped company policies around parental support and ethical leadership, transforming her personal experience into systemic change. Her reputation grew, not as a woman scorned, but as a leader defined by composure and vision. She no longer feared being misunderstood. Her life no longer required secrecy. On a quiet evening, Sharon stood by the river again, Eliza asleep against her chest, watching city lights shimmer across the water. She thought of the girl she once was, the woman who learned to hide her power to protect love. She smiled softly, understanding now that love should never require disappearance. The past was settled. The future was hers. And in that stillness, Sharon Jones stepped fully into her new beginning.